Eventide Entertainment presents The Drive-In, hosted by Aaron Lopez. All right, welcome to The Drive-In, everybody. We're doing something for the very first time this episode. We are coming at you from two states. We are coming at you from Ohio and Texas. A longtime listener of the podcast, which is actually really funny to say. It's like longtime listener, first time caller. Longtime listener of the podcast is Andre, a friend of my wife's through work, but then actually just a friend of mine through our love of The Simpsons and our love of movies. So, Andre from Houston, welcome.
Thank you. I was actually going to use that line, and you took it, so now I have nothing.
Oh, no. Well, okay. Hopefully you can steal something later on. I'll let you do. If you know the what is it? Not the sign off, but the interlude for the break. If you remember that one, I'll let you do that one.
Ooh, that'll be tough on the fly.
We'll see. We'll see how close you are. So we are talking about Annihilation today. The movie directed by Alex Garland, starring Natalie Portman, Jennifer Jason Leigh, Oscar Isaac, Tessa Thompson, Gina Rodriguez. This is actually only Garland's second movie that he has directed. He's actually written some novels and some screenplays and things like that, but he directed Ex Machina in 2015, and now he's back with Annihilation. But I always like to incorporate the guest host somehow into why they are actually having some credibility in talking about the movie we're talking about. So, Andre, give me a little bit of your history with sci-fi movies.
So, I mean, we discussed this briefly, but really, I'm obviously a big geek from day one. My dad made sure of that, and we got plenty of Star Trek, Star Wars in the house, and that's really like the background of where I started. And then I've always just been a movie guy. Like, I was really early adopter of Netflix, and I've got Movie Pass now, and I live across from a theater, so I'm there pretty much every weekend.
I was having some Movie Pass issues today. It was they went through an update for their app, and it seemed to throw everything off. But I think I got it figured out. But it was just annoying. But
that did happen to me yesterday, and I got them on the phone, and their customer service was wonderful. I mean, she apologized profusely. It was like, I'm sorry for any inconvenience, but they did get it like reset.
Well, that's good. Yeah, they had said that you should call, and then I called them today, and it said, we are experiencing a high volume. And I was like, okay, so it's not just me. Good.
Yeah.
But yeah, so we went and saw, I went and saw the movie today. You went and saw it for a second time today. You went last night. And I think we're going to have some similar movies, but let's wait and see. So the trailer rundown is Pacific Rim Uprising. We had Rampage, Red Sparrow again, Sicario 2, Uncle Drew, Mission Impossible Fallout, and A Quiet Place. Did those match up to what you saw?
Yeah, those were spot on with everything I had.
That doesn't happen often, and I used to think that the movies themselves would be... It would be that way, where, hey, I saw this movie and these trailers are going to happen for this movie. But actually, I think the first time it happened was with Justice League, the episode that we did for that. Aaron, the friend who hosted that one with me, he actually only had like one of the same movies, and we live in the same state. We went to the same theater to see it, just at different times. So I think that's kind of cool that it actually matched up for us in this one. So with that being said, though, are there any of them that you are looking at to see, things that jump out to you as being a little bit more exciting to go and see in a few weeks?
So my big one is definitely going to be Pacific Rim. I mean, that's probably the one that I will go see that Thursday night.
Yeah, I'm worried that it's going to not be as good as the first one, have like the sophomore slump kind of a thing, but the trailer looks good. The second one that I saw, the first one gives away a little too much. The second one gives away less, but actually gives you more plot, so you kind of are excited to see what happens. And I think that will definitely make... I'm going to go see it. It was never going to be in question. I loved the first one when that came out. But now I'm definitely feeling more encouraged to go see this one now after seeing the second trailer.
That, and I try to support Del Toro in everything he does, because everything he does it's like a movie that I love.
Yeah, I'm trying to think back if there's been a movie that he's put out that I haven't really liked. And I think the only one I wasn't a huge fan of was more of just him on as like a consultant. I don't think he directed it, and if he did, you might be able to tell me, but was it The Orphanage?
I never saw that one, so I'm guessing it probably wasn't one of his.
It was bizarre. Like his name was attached to it. And I don't know if he was a producer or a director or writer or something like that. But his name was attached, and it looked really good. The trailers make it seem like it's this really good, mysterious thriller kind of a sci-fi movie, and it didn't live up to it. So, yeah, everything else he's done though has been really, really phenomenal, including Shape of Water, which I think is going to win a lot of awards on Sunday.
That's one I am behind on, but I need to go see it. I've put it off and put it off.
Yeah, go check that one out. It's really, really good. It's a little weird at times. There's a couple scenes that you definitely have a Del Toro feel, but they go a little beyond that even. But it's a really, really good movie. Outside of that, though, I think the one that everybody who listens knows that I am not going to go see is Red Sparrow. I'm so sick and tired of seeing Red Sparrow trailers. I've seen more Red Sparrow trailers than I have movies, and I don't even know how that happens, but it's just getting old. I'm so tired of hearing Lawrence's horrible accent, and I haven't even seen the movie yet.
I mean, that's my big problem with it is, she sounds, it's very forced. It's just too much, and I don't know if it was just, maybe she had a bad coach that was teaching her, but it's something that really puts me off in the movie. I'll probably still go see it just because I like the premise. I like some of the other people that are in it. But, yeah, not the one I'm super excited about.
Yeah, I love her as an actress. There's not been a movie that she's done recently that I've seen. I haven't seen Mother yet. But there's not been a movie that she has done that I really haven't liked. I just feel like she's kind of feeling like, oh, hey, I've done all these. I need to be a foreigner in a movie now. And it's like a bucket list thing for her because it doesn't feel like a movie that she would do. But then again, at the same time, it kind of does. I think I'm just kind of salty because I keep seeing it and I'm just not that interested in seeing the movie. So yeah, I think that of those, the other ones I'm really excited to see. Rampage looks really good. I remember playing the video game as a kid. Did you ever play Rampage growing up?
So I didn't, and I guess this is me not knowing, but I had just watched, Skull Island the other day, and I didn't. Is this part of the same universe?
No, it's it may end up that way, but I think this is just like a one-off movie.
Okay.
Yeah, Rampage. So the video game essentially is very similar to what the trailer gives as far as its premise. You have a little bit of a difference because in the video game, it's 3 different people. These 3 people have been exposed to some sort of a chemical, which then transforms them into the creatures. You have a guy that's turned into the big blue monkey, the monkey, the lizard, and the wolf. And so it's very similar, and you just go around destroying cities, and you destroy the cities and eat people, and like climb on buildings, and it's funny. It's a time waster kind of a game. It really doesn't require a whole lot of skill. But they released it originally in arcade form, and then in Nintendo 64 put out a Rampage Worldwide, and you went around destroying like Paris and stuff. But it was fun. It was a different kind of a game. It really wasn't anything all too special, but it kind of nostalgia factor for me going to see it. And plus, Dwayne Johnson has not been part of anything recently that has not been received very well. I mean, Jumanji is still in theaters, at least up here it is. I don't know how. I loved it. It was great. But it came out in December, and here we are almost in March, and it is still taking up a couple screenings a week. So,
yeah, I think
very impressive.
I and most of America will go see anything with The Rock in it.
Oh yeah, and I was a big wrestling fan and still am. But I think that what he has done is just been, hey, take the vehicle of being known by a large amount of people, stepping away from that group, and then bringing some of them with him is exactly what you see like John Cena doing. I'm so excited to see him in Cockblockers. I don't know if you've seen the trailer for that, but it looks hilarious.
No, not yet. What's that one about?
Essentially, you've got, I don't know how many, but you have 3 daughters who are going on prom dates, and they make a pact that they're going to lose their virginity that night.
Oh, I think I did see that one. Yeah, a while back.
Yeah. The parents oversee this on the laptop that's opened up because it's like a Mac, and so anything you text also shows up on the Mac. And so they're like, oh no, they're trying to figure it out. So the whole night is basically the parents trying to keep the kids from having sex and the kids trying to do the high school prom night thing, and it looks really funny. One of the trailers ends with John Cena running away from a house with a beer bong stuck up his butt.
I might go check that one.
Yeah, I'm looking forward to that, and A Quiet Place looks really interesting. I've seen the same trailer about 4 times now. Not as often as I have Red Sparrow, so it's not quite upsetting me yet. But I don't want more. If it comes out in April, so I'll go see that one.
I was kind of hesitant, but I'm excited to see Jim Halpert do something else.
Well, he directed this.
Oh,
Did
really?
You know that?
No.
Yeah. So he directed it. He starred in it. I don't think he didn't write it, because actually I saw that I grew up in the Quad Cities that shares a border between Illinois and Iowa, and actually 2 guys from Bettendorf, Iowa, wrote it. And so I'm like, oh, that's kind of cool. Like, I didn't go to that high school, but it's real close to where I grew up. So they wrote it, and you got what's his name? You said Halpert. Now I'm thrown off.
I don't know his actual name. Yeah.
I can't think of it now. But you got him who's actually doing it. I can think of his wife, Emily Blunt, who is also in it. And so this will be good. I think it'll be interesting. It seems like they're being very secretive about it right now, and they should. They shouldn't give away too much.
Yeah, I think that trailer it's the opposite of Red Sparrow. Like, it's just enough to keep you interested.
Yeah. So if I've seen that one trailer, I think 5 times, and I'm okay with it. I've seen the 3 different versions of the Red Sparrow one combined 40 times, and I'm not looking forward to it. All right, let's get into the fun part. Here's our spoiler-free summary for Annihilation. A biologist, played by Natalie Portman, signs up to enter and study a phenomenon known as the shimmer, where mutations run rampant and the laws of nature do not apply. Without giving away anything, major spoilers, do you think is there anything that we need to add to that summary?
The one thing I would add is, like, I was not expecting to be creeped out, and I really was.
Yeah, this is not just your traditional sci-fi. This is almost like a sci-fi horror movie,
yeah.
At least in a few scenes. So yeah, I definitely think if you have not yet seen this and you wanted our initial reactions to it, by all means go see it. But if you're kind of squeamish or you're not really into any horror movies, it's not like a Friday the 13th kind of horror, but it will creep you out. It will get a little weird at times, disturbing, and if you don't like that, then you may want to stay away. If it's your ball game, though, you probably will enjoy. But is that it for our summary before we get started?
Yeah, I'm good with it.
Okay. So as I always like to say, if this is your opportunity to step away, if you have not yet seen Annihilation and you plan on going to see it, you have plenty of time. I think it'll be in theaters for a few more weeks. It's not one that is going to be one and done. But go and see that and then come back and see us and listen to this episode when you've seen it. All right, so now we have just those who have seen Annihilation or those who like to listen to me talk and, by proxy, now Andre talk. First off, I'm really happy to have you on board, and I've got a really, really specific question about Annihilation. What the hell was this movie about?
So, that's a tough one. I mean, obviously I liked the way it was laid out. I liked who they cast, which we'll get into, but... yeah, I don't know. It was about an alien invasion, I guess, if you want to.
Yeah, usually these sci-fi movies have like some sort of social implication, like they're subtly talking about something big. The only thing I can talk to saying that this is about was when you had Ventress's character, played by Jennifer Jason Leigh, where she's talking about the concept between self-destruction and suicide. Yeah. That's the only social aspect that I could pull out of this entire movie.
That one really hit me, too, because she's like, oh, some people smoke, some people drink, and I was like, wow, that's everybody that I know.
Yeah, and we'll get to that in a little bit, because that's one of the biggest overarching themes or messages that I could pull from this. But yeah, I don't know what this movie was about. I have no clue. I didn't dislike it. I was enjoying the movie. It was a movie that I think that I will recommend people to see, but I cannot tell them what it's about because I don't even know.
That may be the best part, though, because everybody will take something different away from it.
And that's why when we do get to the end and I give this rating, it's going to be a little higher than I would have expected, because if they would have laid out a very perfect sequence, I probably would have liked it less. So let's jump into the plot. we have some interesting elements, and at any point in time, if I miss something, because I put together this, but I think I might be off. So if there's anything that I ever skip, tell me to shut up and let's go back and talk.
Okay.
We start out with Lena, our main character, and she's in a room surrounded by, well, not surrounded, but she's sitting in a room. She's beat up. She has a few people in hazmat suits in the room and many doctors looking on through a window off to the side. And we get, and I always like to refer to this as the Tarantino style. We know what happens. We know the characters' names, and we know that they're either missing or dead, and that she survived the shimmer. And now we're going to go back. It's like, all right, let's go back. Let's learn about now how this all happened. Do you like that style? Because some people are disappointed by the fact that they walk into the movie, within the first 5 minutes, they know how it ends, more or less.
See, sometimes yes, but most of the time, if you get me like wrapped up in the story, I'm going to forget all of that you told me, and I'm going to, like, when the big reveal happens, I'm just as excited as everybody else in the theater.
And I mean, it works. If it didn't work, Tarantino wouldn't have had a career, because he does it in every single one of his movies, and you see it enough in other films where people like to show you exactly what happened, and then you go back and piece it together. So I didn't mind it. I didn't know that this would be the style that I would get into with this particular movie. I felt that Annihilation would have better been served without really giving away the ending, especially when so much of it was dealing with the tense moments from throughout the movie. Knowing that these characters were going to die, I didn't really feel as on edge in the scenes where they were facing life or death. I'm like, oh, they're going to die.
The one thing I really did like too is, and I'm sure we'll get there, but in a couple minutes later in the movie, they just launch right into it. It's like, hey, your husband's been gone for a year. Like, there is no explanation to it. They're just like, we're just going to state that fact and run with it.
Yeah, and I did really appreciate how there were moments. There was only one of those times, and I'll save it for when we get there. There's only one time where I was upset with them progressing the plot fairly quickly. This is one of those movies that it could have very easily dragged on, and at no point in time did I ever feel bored, because we get into the shimmer pretty quickly. So I appreciated that. I liked it. I thought it was good. We'll talk about the one time I was kind of confused, but that's not till later. So we also find a little bit more about her as we do progress pretty quickly about her husband being gone. She's a professor. She's talking to her students about tumors, which I thought was kind of a interesting thing that we see throughout, this idea of cell growth, and cell growth is not always good. It sometimes can be bad, like tumors and disease. But she finishes the class, and we see this guy come up to her, and he doesn't seem to have any reason to be there, like a colleague. He will come back into the story later on. But he's telling her, hey, we're having a barbecue. You should come. And she's like, no, I'm going to paint our... And she stops, and she says, I'm going to repaint the room. And he, like, grabs her shoulder, and he's like, hey, it's a barbecue. You're not doing any harm to your husband's memory. And you're like, oh, okay, he's gone. He's out of the picture. We kind of knew it a little bit if you've seen any of the trailers, and it felt like the guy wasn't there based on the way that we see the pictures. But it was very abrupt, but you're like, all right, I understand why she's a little upset. But also at the same time, I don't know, I mean, it's validated, we'll talk about, but Daniel seemed like that's the character's name, the black gentleman who comes up and tells her, he seemed a little forceful. He seemed like he needed to back off a little bit.
Yeah, he was pretty forward. I think going back and seeing it the second time, like, that's your first inclination of, like, something isn't right here.
Yeah, and I mean, I think we should probably just address it. We'll talk about it, but we find out later that Lena, our main character, has had an affair with this guy. And that really brings out the awkwardness, because she's told him later in the movie in a flashback, hey, it's over, we need to stop doing this. Kane, her husband, knows about it, makes it really kind of an awkward, not breakup, but an end to the affair. But he continues to push it because they work together and he likes her. So, but yeah, he did come off a little forceful.
And if I can sidebar really quickly, just because you said his name. So Oscar Isaac's character is named Kane. Mm-hmm. And all I kept thinking was, what kind of parent names their child after the guy who killed his brother in the Bible?
It's funny that you say that. I have a second or third cousin whose name is Kane.
Well, there you go. I just insulted your uncle.
It happened. But it's so funny because because okay, we referred to wrestling beforehand. Anytime
Yeah.
I hear that, I immediately go to the guy with the mask and
Yeah.
red and black, and
The
I
Undertaker's
think about
brother.
that guy. Yeah, Undertaker's brother. So, which is named because his brother is the evil bad guy, and so there's biblical. Hey, you do get your allusions to the Bible in professional wrestling as well.
That's true.
But yeah, I think it's kind of an interesting element of, and we can get that. There's more to it, and I didn't realize it until you just said that. But I think there's something to his name even within the movie being Cain. We'll talk about that when we get closer to the end. So she's starting to put her room back together. She's getting ready to paint it. She's painting it, and all of a sudden you see somebody at the bottom of the stairs, and you're kind of creeped out. It's weird. And then he turns, and you're like, "Oh my God, it's Oscar Isaac." I thought it was symbolic. I didn't actually think he was there. I thought it was just like, oh, it's his ghost, or it's an old memory that's gonna she'll walk through him or something. Did you get that vibe at all, or what was your reaction when he was back after we found out he had been gone for so long?
Yeah, so obviously it being a sci-fi movie, I was like, this guy is not in the house. Like you said, like it's just a hallucination, or she's gonna walk right through him, like it's a flashback. But like you just think there's no way he's actually there.
Yeah, and he walks up the stairs, and she doesn't notice him immediately, but she does hear somebody walking up, and then he walks up, and you can tell that there's something up because she is losing her mind. As anybody would after their loved one being gone for a year without anything, thinking they're dead, and then they're standing there in front of you. She's crying and kissing him and like holding him, and he just looks like he's in a comatose state.
It was the most authentic ugly cry face I have ever seen.
She does a really good ugly cry,
Yeah.
though. She's done that in a lot of movies. If Natalie Portman does one thing well, it's cry ugly. I keep going back to Star Wars where she's like, you're tearing me apart, Annie. Like, yeah, and we are all dying on the inside for you having said that line.
You're going down a road I can't follow. Like, you don't have roads.
Where we're going, we don't need roads. Yeah, I think that's funny you mention that because she does do that very well. I mean, somebody's got to be able to have that typecast role. Ugly cries. So yeah, she does just really, really horrible cry, and then she's like kissing him, and he's barely even holding her back. Like, he hugs her a little bit, but it's just weird. And so she takes him downstairs, and it's more at this point she's upset because she's like, "Where have you been? You're not giving me anything." I called everybody. I reached out to all of these places, and no one knew where you were. And if they did, they wouldn't say. So she's very upset, and he is still not saying a damn thing. He's a lot of "I don't know" and just very simple answers. But then at one point, there's two elements of this opening or this conversation that I really wanted to talk about. You have him almost come to a realization. She says, well, how did you get home? And he said, I walked up the stairs and I saw you in the doorway. So the first memory he has, or the first memory he's willing to share with her, is seeing her in the doorway. The second thing is in this interaction is the glass. The way that the glass was positioned with the water in the glass and the mirrored reflection of their hands behind it, which I thought was awesome. What were your thoughts, and you can talk on one or both or in whatever way, on both the glass being the glass of water reflecting and refracting their hands behind it, and his first memory of her.
So let's work backwards. I didn't realize it was obviously you notice what's going on because that's the shot. It's their hands behind the glass, but I didn't quite make that connection with the prism that we'll get to later on. But yeah, that was kind of mind blowing to see the way they set it up and kind of let you know this is what's happening.
Yeah, that mirrored effect was just so cool.
Yeah, and I think they did it a couple of times. We'll get to just visually how stunning the movie is. Mm-hmm. But the other thing was, what was your first point?
The with him walking up the stairs, his memory, the first thing he saw.
So that's kind of, you talked about him. He looks like he's comatose. That's your first indication that something's wrong with this guy. And that's just once you get into the movie, you start figuring out what's really going on. But that was really the first tell of you're basically just waiting for the shoe to drop. Something's wrong with him. What is it?
Yeah, and we come back to that glass and we find out really that there is something wrong other than him just kind of being mentally unstable. When he takes a drink of water, and as he's setting it down, he says, "I don't feel very good," and she looks down at the glass and there's blood in it.
So that was one of the parts that stuck out to me both times. Is he actually says, "I'm not feeling very well," and I was like, that stood out to me just because I'm a grammar Nazi. But like, "I'm not feeling very good," is what somebody would normally say.
Yeah. Well, and it's funny because we'll find out later is that there may be more reason to what normally would happen and what actually does happen. So yeah, he's got blood in his drink, and immediately we then cut to an ambulance that is taking him, who is, Kane is spitting up blood, and Portman's character Lena's there saying, I'm here, I'm taking care of you, and she's just gotten him back, and the guy's dying in front of her eyes, so you can imagine the trauma she's going through. And then all of a sudden you've got cops and helicopters, which came on a little sudden for me. I was like, whoa, they're there. But the cops and helicopters and the SWAT teams stop the ambulance and pull him out and yank jab a syringe into her neck, and she passes out. Then we've got this interesting, and they do this a couple times. They do it 3 times actually, but they introduce the kind of the header where it's like, okay, blackout area X. So now we're moved on. It's almost like chapters, which I like sometimes. I liked it in this one. I don't always like. What were your thoughts on like them sectioning the movie off by the particular setting?
I liked it in this movie. I was watching, Civil War the other day, and it's like they do it every time they change scenes, and it's just annoying at that point. But I really did like it in this movie.
Yeah, and I think especially when you have a movie that is based on something that is not so clear. We get it 3 times. We get it with Area X, the Shimmer, and the Lighthouse. We could probably have put it together that those are the places that we're in. But with them only doing it a couple times, I think it was at least a nice, fun way of moving the plot, which they do pretty well. Moving the plot, but also saying, hey, we're at a new place. You don't know what this place is called because you've never been there. But now you know, and we can move past it.
Which, by the way, did you figure out where the park was? I didn't know off the top of my head.
No, they mentioned the name of it, but I don't think it didn't ring a bell with me as being an actual place.
Okay.
When I was looking up stuff on this movie, getting ready for today, it is based on a trilogy called the Southern Reach trilogy.
Okay.
So I think that was kind of cool, but I have no idea where the Southern Reach is. We know it's probably somewhere around Florida or something like that because of their constant description of the swamp areas. But I'm not exactly sure where it was.
That's what I know they have the map up sometimes in the background. I was trying to look like, is this Louisiana? Like, what are we talking about here?
Yeah, and I'm looking right now to see based on it, and people love the series, but it doesn't specifically talk. It's St. Mark's National Wildlife Refuge is kind of based on where he put this together, and this is in Florida. So if it's based on what he based it off of, it would be in Florida.
Okay.
Which makes sense. It makes sense based on the movie itself. So I have no qualms with that. So we jump into Area X, and she wakes up. She is, she being Lena, Natalie Portman's character, and she's immediately throwing up, and we find out it's because she's having a hangover, basically, because of this sedative. And this is where we are introduced to Jennifer Jason Leigh's character. What were your first reactions of her character? Because she always plays this kind of just stone face character. Anytime I've seen her, she does a really good job with was it the Hateful Eight as being this kind of secondary character that you meet later on. But what were your first reactions to her character, who kind of plays it very cold, the cold government agent, at least in this movie?
Yeah, so initially you can tell she's the one in charge. Like she comes in the room and commands that respect. And Natalie Portman, I think, starts to realize that as they're going through the conversation. She's like, wait, I'm done answering questions. Like, where is my husband? But that was the first thing I got was like, you can definitely tell this person is in charge.
Yeah, and she just walked around with an air of confidence. And it's something that I think that we will talk about because 4 out of the 5 major characters in this movie were women. And it was even something that you joked about when we were like, should we talk about this one? Do 2 guys have the right to talk about the power that this movie presents women? And I'm like, yeah, that's a cool point. Like, we'll talk about kind of, there's a rhyme and reason to why this movie revolves around these 5 women as opposed to any men, and we'll get to that here in a little bit. But yeah, I think that is an interesting point that you made. I don't know when this happened. I think it's shortly after this conversation between the two of them, between Ventress and Lena. But we see the kind of preface of this incident with an asteroid coming into the atmosphere and ultimately hitting the lighthouse. It wasn't placed at the very, very beginning of the movie. It's like 20 minutes in, or 15, 20 minutes in. What do you think about the placement of that little cutscene to explain the lighthouse and the potential shimmer?
I think it's similar. Well, my reaction was similar to, like, let's jump right in. We're 12 months into this, to your husband being gone. Like, I'm perfectly happy with this thing hit something, and that's where we started.
Yeah, and I thought it was kind of cool. I was expecting it to fall, because if an asteroid hits a building, I don't know if the building's going to stay up, but apparently the lighthouse was built very well.
They don't build them like they used to.
Yeah, and like it was, I don't know, it was cool. I always like the incorporation of like asteroids and space into sci-fi. I dig that kind of element. But a part of me was like, it felt like it chose the lighthouse because it was skimming along the surface of this beach before it finally landed. And I'm sure trajectory experts out there will say that it didn't choose it; it just was going to land there. But It just felt kind of too obvious that it was going to land there. Or that it did land there, which I was like, okay, yeah, it chose that spot. I don't know if that's an actual landmark, and I'd kind of be curious to find out if that particular lighthouse is, or if it's just a lighthouse down in Florida.
Yeah, I mean, similar to what you were saying, like, it seems like it chose that place, and I'm guessing, once you get into everything that happens later on, that kind of makes more sense. But yeah, the internet will just argue that you're wrong.
As they should. Yeah. So, we have... We have a little bit of an interesting interaction with Lena and all of our other female characters. It's the night after she first finds out that Lena is not going to leave because her husband's dying and she probably has nowhere else to go at this point. And she's sitting out looking at the shimmer at night, and you have it's actually Gina Rodriguez's character Anya, who comes up and says like, hey, let's go make some friends. And she doesn't realize that she's there to see her husband. None of them do. They just think that she's another person who's been asked to join the team. They go and they sit and they take bets. They come out to find out they took bets to find out if she was a biologist. What was it? Biologist was what Josie Thompson's character said. Shepard
had law enforcement, I think.
Yeah, that's right, law enforcement. And then I thought this was funny. Rodriguez's character Anya said single, which like. Okay, so we have a lesbian character. We're like, okay, cool, very not so subtle way of explaining that. But then also like the punch of like, well, she might be single soon. Like, I'm like, come on, Anya, too soon. Like,
I think my favorite part about that scene is, at least for me and probably most audiences, the last thing you saw Tessa Thompson in was Ragnarok. So she goes from being this like super badass warrior to like really shy scientist, and it was perfect. Like her acting ability was amazing,
and she did such a good job that I didn't even realize it was her until they were running the credits, and I was like, Tessa Thompson was in this? Oh my god, she was Josie. Like, she did a great job.
Yeah,
and we'll talk about, because one of the reasons why she's even more of a mirrored image to her character in Ragnarok is the question that you could say, how strong is she in this versus how strong was she in Ragnarok? We'll get to that. It talks about how great an actress she is. But then we find out that the three girls are about to enter the shimmer. And they are asking, or Alina asks, well, why? Why would you enter? And this is where it starts to get interesting with this concept of the females taking over. Every other team has been primarily military and male who have entered. So they're going the opposite route. They're going to send female scientists into the shimmer and see if they get an opposite outcome. Did you believe like that would have been the logical thing, the next step for a team like this to do?
I did. I mean, I think once you've exhausted those military options, yeah, we would like to send a scientist first as rational people, but the initial reaction is like, send in somebody with a gun. The other thing about that is when Natalie Portman's character is like, oh, well, we're sending a bunch of women in, and Tessa Thompson goes, scientists.
It has nothing to do with the fact that we're women. It's that we're scientists. And that's like, yeah, that's absolutely right. But none of us immediately think that, which is kind of I think to one of the things that they were trying to speak on is, Yes, they are women, but that's not what is defining them in this role. It's the fact that they're all scientists, biologists, psychologists, things like that.
Well, that it credentials everybody. Like, we all deserve to be here and go do this.
Yeah, and that's why when they find out about her being a biologist, they're like, of course, she's smart. She belongs here. Like, she's not just this random person who's here. We knew she was smart because apparently they've been profiling people for so long to get them involved with this that it would only make sense that the best and brightest of the citizens would be out there at Area X. So then she tells, we find out Kane is dying, as we kind of figured out, and Lena has decided that she is going to go into the Shimmer with them, saying that's the only way she's going to be able to do something for him. She belongs there, she's got the experience, and Ventress's character has no problem with it. She knows how to use a gun, she's smart enough to know the area because she is a biologist, and she's got motivation to come home. So she has no problem with it. She does have a slight problem with the fact that she didn't tell them that her husband was the one guy that they are fully aware of who has escaped the Shimmer. What were your thoughts on that? Like, do you think that, because we know what eventually happens as a result of not telling, but going into it, do you think it was smarter for them not to know, or do you think it would have been better if they knew who Kane was in relation to Lena?
Yeah, I mean, I'm a fan of, she shouldn't have told him. I think she made the right decision. And I don't remember what the line was in there that, is it Ventress?
Ventress, yeah.
Okay, that Ventress says, but she's like, you're a soldier, you can something, and you're a scientist, like, you can learn. I don't remember what that line was.
I think it's you can fight.
Okay, yeah. She was like, you can fight and you can learn. And I think that was really the important thing is, like, it doesn't matter that her husband went in. The important thing is that she's probably the right person for the job.
Yeah, and it's kind of surprising that she wasn't actually flagged down when her husband was, which I have a theory and an idea as to why she ended up there anyway, which we'll get to at the end. But so maybe it was a coincidence, maybe it wasn't. I will explain further later why I don't think it is a coincidence. But they all jump into the Shimmer, and I say that so haphazardly. They just jump into the Shimmer. No, they walk very slowly and somberly up to this because no one has escaped, and they're all afraid they're going to die.
Which, this is our first look at, like, the Shimmer up close and just seeing how bright and colorful it is. Like, it doesn't look dangerous at all.
Oh, no. It looks like a bubble. Like, you know, the colors that you get off of a bubble that shine after you blow a bubble. It looks like this giant dome that is not really scary at all. Yeah, you bring up a really good point. And that's something, too, I loved visually, that they played with light so much in this movie. They completely embraced this whole aspect of the prism. Absolutely cool. So they get into the Shimmer, and immediately they enter, and they don't remember how they got there.
Well, we get our next, what do you want to call it? The, like, screen wipe?
Oh, yeah. Our kind of like our intro into a new section. With it being the Shimmer, and they kind of chapter it off and saying, okay, now we're going to spend a lot of time here, and we do. I'd say probably at least half the movie, if not more than that, is spent in the Shimmer.
Yeah. And
thank God it was not like a King Kong where we spend 2 hours building up to something, and then we finally get to see the cool elements that we wanted to see.
Wait, you talking old King Kong or Kong Skull Island?
Old King Kong, yeah. Jack Black King Kong, not Skull Island. Skull Island was so much better.
We could talk trash about that movie for like an hour and a half.
Well, and I appreciated what they tried to do by incorporating, like Naomi Watts and what's his name, Adrian Brody and Jack Black even, and I thought they all are great actors, but it just was so boring.
Well, the problem was like you said, they spent 2 hours, getting there, and then we had a whole other hour of taking him to New York, and you were just like, I'm done with this movie.
No, what I loved about Skull Island was that maybe 20 minutes in, and we're ready to roll, and we see him, and we've got some great action, and they showed off the actual terror of the island as opposed to just giving us like one creepy element.
Well, the other thing I feel like I need to disclaimer because of the movie we just saw and kind of talking about some of the themes is that Brie Larson is never like a damsel in distress in that movie. She's a badass like everybody else.
Yeah, absolutely. And it's one of those elements that Naomi Watts played the damsel in I don't know the original, but the less recent remake. She was the damsel. She really only had one element of not being the damsel, and that was when she was doing her juggling and like making Kong laugh. She absolutely had no business being a badass. She didn't play it at all, and Larson was. So yeah, it's a really good point. So we're in the Shimmer. They don't know where they're at. Apparently, they've been there for probably 2 to 4 days because the rations are lower by about 2 to 4 days. And this is the only time I expected a few more moments of them not remembering things, but this is the only time that they kind of had a memory blackout, unless I'm missing one.
I think that was the only one. Was this the part you were talking about earlier where you were saying they moved the plot forward and you weren't happy with it?
Nope. I'm okay with this one.
Okay,
we'll get to it. It was one of those. It's coming up. It's probably in the last. It'll probably be after the break. But yeah, well, I had no problem with him moving the plot because that was one of the things that when he came out, he didn't remember how long he had been gone either. So I was like, okay, I had the residual effects of this early conversation, and I understood like it's not going to be completely perfect. But all their equipment is wonky and it's not working. At least all of the comm equipment as far as knowing where they're at. And Lee says, Ventress is saying, you expected any different? We've had 3 years of people coming in and we've had 3 years of radio silence.
The other thing that I thought was really funny was how many times did they have that conversation? Did they have it all 4 days?
And then we finally just saw when they decided to move on.
Yeah.
It's a good point. And that's one of those unanswered questions. There's a lot of unanswered questions in this movie, and some of them I'm okay with being unanswered, and some of them I'm kind of irritated with. That one I'm okay with, because it brings out a lot more discussion, and you can... Sometimes I like to play devil's advocate, and I like that idea that we might just finally have caught up with them deciding. They could have just been playing around with the idea of, okay, Leah, let's move, or no, let's wait. I don't know. Maybe they just slept for 4 days, but they don't remember setting up camp either.
That's the dream.
I know, right? So they just said, all right, let's get going. We're losing enough daylight already as it is. And they go to the boathouse, which is probably one of my favorite sections. There's another one, that the one at the town, which was pretty cool. But the boathouse is cool because we finally get some action. We haven't had any action in this movie yet up to this point. And unfortunately, if you've seen the trailer, it gave away a little bit of that. They go up to this boathouse, and immediately Lena is looking at these plants which are growing and very colorful and different types. Like you can see like what look like orchids and others that look like roses and daisies and just a bunch of random, and some that are just completely tropical. And she's saying these are all coming from the same plant, so these are all the same species, but yet you wouldn't notice that. You would essentially look at these species as being mutating. If what this was happening in humans was happening, you would definitely call this a mutation. Josie goes into the boathouse, comes back out, and they're like, anything? They're like, no, it was abandoned a long time ago, and she's like halfway through her sentence, she gets pulled back in. Sadly, that is in the trailer, so that didn't surprise me. I knew that was coming.
It's one of those things you just, like, you know what's going to happen, you're just like, okay, let's get it over with so we can get to the next thing.
Yeah, but then you don't know why it happens, which is cool because then they jump in there and she's yelling, something's got my back, something's got my back. And then eventually all of the girls go in, which I thought was stupid. If you see something pulling a friend of yours, a colleague, underneath the water, wouldn't one or two stay out of the water with a gun drawn or something?
So that's my problem with situations like this in movies is like, there's no way everybody puts their weapon down. Somebody's keeping it.
And it's weird because they all go in, and it's a small area. Essentially, it's a smaller house, like a one-room house that has been like sinking into the lake. And then after, when they all escape the house and they look, you have this, what I like to call is Gator Shark.
Yeah.
You got Gator Shark who crawls out of the front door. So he was in there the whole time, and it's not that big of a space. All 5 of them are in this small little mini pool in the side of a house, and it doesn't go after any of them after they get her away from it. Like, I didn't believe that.
I'm just really looking forward to the sci-fi made-for-TV movie Gator Shark.
I mean, it's already out there, I think, but... And that was one of the things, is the Gator was one of the least well done as far as the graphics, the CGI effects, in my opinion, of all of them. I thought it was cool, but it looked fake. Whereas, like, the bear that we see later and, like, the tree deer things, they looked more realistic. It just looked... Because I think it was the skin, and that was because the mutation of this gator looked fake, because it was mutating. It looked like the skin was burning off of it, essentially. Mm-hmm. But, I don't know, did you get that vibe at all, that it was bad CGI, or...
No, I mean, I didn't...
Am I just being too picky?
Yeah, it's just you, Aaron. I didn't really have any issues with it. It was, I mean, again, it was in the trailer, like, that's her big, I'm going to shoot this thing scene. It was just kind of for me like, okay, what's the next thing we're going to do? Because I've seen all this in the trailer.
Yeah, and that's the moment, too, where they find out, like, hey, she can shoot a gun, which I think it's funny that they're about to send these people into this unknown area, and none of them have any training with a gun.
Yeah, Gina Rodriguez is a paramedic, like...
And you can tell, because she shoots at this thing, and her gun's flailing all over the place, and then it jams immediately, so she has no training whatsoever. And so it doesn't make any sense for her to be holding this gun and going into a space that she may need to use this gun without any training. They're just sending these scientists in there to die, essentially. Lena was able to do her thing and shows off that she has this ability, and that leads us into this new conversation on the river. And I liked this conversation. It was between her and Shepard, and they're on one boat and the other three are on another, and they're rowing down the river, and they have a conversation about all the women are there with baggage. They ask, why did you sign up? Because no one's signing up for this mission unless they've lost something or they've got something that kind of is a red flag about, hey, yeah, I'm okay with doing this.
Yeah, well, and then just like you get all that background information. So it was what Josie was like cutting herself. Gina Rodriguez was like an addict before that.
They didn't know anything about Ventress. Ventress had no friends, no family, no high points or low points in her life. So she's kind of like this neutral unknown. We'll find out about her later, but at that point in time, we have no idea. And then we found out Shepard lost her daughter to leukemia, and Lena gives enough information without explicitly saying who her husband is, but that she lost her husband. Her husband was KIA, and she herself, they actually met in the army. So, like, starting to piece some things together. They come on the military base, though. They come upon it, and they're like, oh, hey, look it. And they're like, this must have been where, this was where originally the Southern Ridge military base was until it was overtaken by the Shimmer. This is one of those really, really creepy, awkward scenes. They go in and they're looking around and they see bunks and tents and all these things that are up. And Lena comes onto an outpost kind of roster, a schedule, and she sees Kane's name on it, so she knows he was here. She doesn't play it off very subtly because everybody knows that there's a reaction.
Yeah, she's like, "Hey guys, look at this."
Yeah, she's like, "Oh my god!" And then they're like, "What'd you find?" "Oh, hey, everybody, come over and look at this." Like, yeah, you're right. It was not. Look at that. Like, it was almost as good as the ugly cry. But yeah, so luckily for her, Ventress says, well, this might help us because on the table is something for those that come after us, and there's a memory card. They pop the memory card into their video camera. I do
need to disclaim this. Like, this is where it jumped to super creepy.
It did. It was very creepy. And their reactions to the video that they saw were exactly what you would expect.
Yeah.
Like, complete denial because it was so disgusting and creepy. But we see, essentially, these guys, the men who were there, Kane being part of this group, who have a colleague of theirs, a fellow soldier, who they've got, like, held down to a chair, and they're cutting his stomach open. And he's not putting up much of a fight.
It's like he wants them to do it, is what it looked like.
Yeah, it very much felt like he was okay with it. He knew it was going to suck. He was in pain, but he was not putting up a fight like, no, don't do this. Well, they open up his stomach, and they open up like a flap of his skin, and you see his intestines, but his intestines are like rotating. They're like, they refer to him in the movie as like being like worm-like. Really gross, really disgusting.
And then he puts his hand in between them, and it's like going around his hand. It was just...
Yeah, that I was just about to say. Like, he puts his hand in the stomach, and it's very gross. Very squeamish moment of that movie. And they all react appropriately. They kind of like say, nope, that didn't happen. Why? They went crazy, clearly. And then a couple of them, Shepard's like, no, I've never seen that before. That should never have happened. And she's like, no, it was the light playing tricks.
Yeah.
Like, don't know if that was necessarily the case. They're like, no, watch it again. And she's like, you watch it again.
I don't think anybody bought that. Like, she was trying to sell herself on it, and she was like, no.
Yeah. Oh, you could tell. But there's so much to that, too, because you say, like, the light was playing tricks. Well, the light is kind of, like, to me, there was, like, a level to that. She was saying it to try to convince herself it wasn't what it was. But at the same time, you have this. There is some truth to that, because it was the light, which is the shimmer, that was actually changing him and causing it. So in a way, she wasn't wrong, but not in the way in which she was saying. I mean, it's a reach.
Yeah, it is. So my favorite part is Ventress just kind of disappears, and then you start to realize, like, this used to be the headquarters. She knows where that video was shot.
Yeah, and I was going to ask, why does she know where that is? But then, yeah, she had been there before, so I had completely missed that. I was like, yeah, why does she know that immediately where to go? Well, of course, because she used to work there. And that is the case because when we go down into the pool...
it gets creepier.
Yeah, and this guy, and I refer to him in my notes as Exploding Pool Guy, because it looks like his like body just exploded, and then things grew from that. And because you've got like his legs down at the bottom of the pool, and like his torso and like mangled skull plastered up towards like the top of the side of the pool. And I was just like, what the hell's going on?
And that is one of those unanswered questions, is like, what did they do with him after that? Did they kill him? Like, did they leave him tied to the chair? Because obviously he stayed there.
Yeah, and that's the guy. I mean, I don't know what happened. We don't actually know what happened to any of the other guys outside of that group, because that's the only one that has any evidence, and they don't talk about any of the other guys. I don't know if I need to know, but it would have been kind of interesting to see, how did he end up exploded, plastered on the side of a pool?
And I think we skipped over that part, but when they get to the base, Natalie Portman is looking at one of the walls, and you can see it like shifting underneath whatever the shimmer did to it.
Mm-hmm. It's she refers to it as like a malignant tumor too. She calls back to that, and that's one of those elements of like a continued motif that we hear about, is that this whatever is happening inside the shimmer is almost like a disease. Almost, it's like it's changing whatever it is that it encompasses, which is another one of those concepts that I think is really important with Ventress's character that we'll talk about later. So the last little moment that I want to talk about before we take our break is the night at the military base, because quite a few things happen that night. We see Natalie Portman, who holds a piece of the exploding guy that she found and puts it under the microscope and sees that there's like this weird mutation happening at the same time, and it's growing. Even the fact, because they continuously look at the cell division as being a major concept of the movie. It's like, hey, something grows from nothing, and that's the same idea with the shimmer, starting with this little asteroid starting to grow and grow and grow, encompass all these areas. But she sees that, and then there's a conversation between her and Shepard, which I just saw the movie and I don't remember much about that conversation, but I do remember her saying, like, hey, you're not going crazy, it was weird.
Oh, so just because I just saw it, Shepard wakes up and is like, is the mystery unraveling? And Natalie Portman's like, well, something's unraveling.
Yeah.
And then Shepard just kind of reassures her, like, no, you're doing fine. Like, we're all freaked out.
Yeah, and I think it's funny because she immediately then, like, Portman's like, oh, I'm going to go check on Ventress, and seems to be surprised when she sees her down, not in, like, on the tower. She looks down and she's like, oh, like, she's down on the ground with a light on. Like, isn't the whole point of being up in a watchtower being up so you can see things?
Yeah, safety, which I was really glad they took the high ground, obviously Star Wars reference. And then, everybody comes down when all this happens, but that was the one thing I was like, no, you stay in the tower. Like, that's what you want.
Yeah. And especially don't have a light on to show where you're at, if anything is around, looking around to see, like, oh, hey, there's a light. I'm going to go over by that. Yeah, that was just... I would, like... Bad planning.
Inside, I was screaming, like, kill the light, kill the light.
I thought, yeah, as soon as the noises start to happen, I thought they would have. Because, like... Especially when you're using night vision, which Portman wouldn't the light screw with that? Like, that, I don't know. I don't use night vision, but I've seen enough movies to know that you don't look at the light when you've got night vision goggles on.
And that was one of the things I think they probably could have done better, was there's some times where she's supposed to have this military background, but when they're going through like they were watching the perimeter, she kind of asks, like, I think this is what this is, but like she would know that. And I wish they had done that, like, she should have just been more assertive about it. Yeah,
she wasn't very strong in her army background. Like, it was there, but it wasn't her strong point. Which, I mean, it seems like she was a better biologist than she was a soldier.
And they kind of wrote that in when she's in the boat with Shepard. She's like, oh, it feels like it was a lifetime ago. So, I mean, I'm sure some of that goes away over time. I don't know. I didn't serve, but I don't know.
It didn't seem like she had been too impacted by her time in the Army, though. Like, she served for 7 years, and she clearly, some of the pictures that they were in, I would assume it was Iraq or Iran because it seemed desert-like. But I don't know. Who knows? Not important. One of those unanswered questions that I think we can let go.
Yeah.
So the conversation that we mentioned at the beginning of the episode is this idea of self-destruction versus suicide. Lena goes down to ask Ventress about this idea of, why did my husband sign up for a suicide mission? And she's like, this isn't suicide. You know, there was no assumption that they would die. And she says, I think you're confusing self-destruction with suicide. What did you think of this conversation? Because it's probably the deepest element as far as like a message or what you would walk away from with this movie.
And now that I'm thinking back, it was about a midway point, so they probably put it in there thinking, like, we need to get everybody thinking about something, and that's exactly what it did, because, like I said earlier, she uses some examples that everybody can relate to. Like, if you don't drink, you know somebody who does. And, it's not about, like, going out and having 45 drinks. It's just, like, having a couple of beers might be self-destructive.
Yeah, it's this idea of, like, you smoke or you drink or you do things, you act on impulse because that's humanity. We all act upon impulses. They don't always have to make sense. But one of the ones that I really enjoyed her saying, and this is before she talks about breaking up a marriage, which makes me think she knew about the affair as well. Ventress did. But she says that even like messing up or screwing up a good job, and you can tell everybody can relate to that whole conversation. Whether like you said, whether it is the alcohol or smoking. Every adult and many teenagers and children know someone who drinks and or smokes. That alone encompasses almost the entire audience right there. But then on top of that, to throw in concepts like people who have things going for them and they don't like it. A lot of people are afraid of success. Things going well, screw it up somehow, because then you can say you have an out, and it was a really interesting idea of, she said all of us, or a very few people actually commit suicide. Every single one of us self-destructs.
Yep. Yeah. And then she throws it back on her, like, you can probably explain this better as a biologist.
And she said, what does that mean? What are you talking about? Well, you're a biologist. And it's like, back off. So, okay. And then immediately you hear a noise. And we're like, oh, shit, things are going down. You hear like a big roar and a tear of something, and they look in and they're like, oh my god, the perimeter's been breached. Well, clearly it's been breached because you're having this deep conversation, not doing your job, watching over the perimeter like you're out there to do.
Which I should have asked this before we started, but can I drop an F-bomb if I'm quoting the movie?
I think so. We'll just have to tell them to throw an E for explicit on our episode. I don't know if I've had one before, so this will be nice.
That was the thing that surprised me, too, which I didn't get to when we started. But when I was buying the ticket, it was like under 17, not admitted without a parent. I was like, oh, I didn't realize this was rated R. But I love that it was, because she got to say some things like the fence has been torn open like a fucking zipper.
Yeah. I was like, yeah. And I was interested because sometimes that was one where it felt a little forced. Like, hey, I want to cuss right now. We've used our only F-bomb. Oh, I guess we're getting a rated R. I don't know. It was funny that they were able to do that. I don't know if it deserved an R, but by giving them an R, I think you got more gruesome deaths.
Yeah.
And a little bit more language. But, I don't think you could have, with a PG-13, shown him holding a man's rotating intestines.
Yeah, definitely not.
That probably would have been frowned upon. So Shepard's like, oh my god, there's stuff going on, let's go. And then Rodriguez wakes up, or Anya wakes up Josie, and is like, hey, we gotta go. And immediately we see them looking at the fence, and it's like, I don't see anything. And everybody in the audience sees something, because this bear thing is crawling behind them, and takes a huge chomp down on Shepard, and then drags her through the fence. And they don't, and I understand why they don't, but they don't shoot at the thing, probably because they don't want to kill Shepard.
Yeah.
But when someone's being dragged away by something massive, they're going to die. Wouldn't you try to shoot to try to protect them? I don't know. I've never had to defend somebody from a half-dead bear creature.
Just for the record, if I ever get bitten and dragged off by a half-dead bear creature, you shoot that bear, Aaron.
I will shoot the bear. I have your permission to do so, and if I clip you, it's not my fault.
It's fine. No, I'm okay with that. I'm going down kicking and screaming.
And okay, so this is a good time. There's a shift in the movie after this point. So, do you want to try? I took your line. Do you want to try and send us to the break?
I'll try, and you can clean it up. So it's basically like, everyone take this time to go out to the lobby and get your popcorn and your soda and use the restroom, and then come back.
Yeah, you forgot about the jujubes though. In this.
That's what it is. Okay.
But yeah, all right,
or almonds for Jordan.
Yeah, I know, almonds. Yeah, we're at that point now where I'm about ready to say, screw this diet. We're gonna get some popcorn. So for me, next time I go see a movie, I'm gonna go and refill my popcorn. Andre did a good job though. We will see you guys just in a little bit. Let's see what is coming up soon from Eventide.
If there's one thing that's true about wrestling fans, it's how much they like to talk about wrestling. Join Aaron Lopez and Ben Norsworthy for the Top Rope Wrestling Podcast.
Let's get ready to rumble!
Tune in every episode and be ringside as these two break down all of the big matches in the world of professional wrestling. Brought to you by Eventide Entertainment. You know, there's nothing quite as satisfying as a good conversation with intelligent company. Join comedian Don Smith every week as he sits down and talks with comedians, actors, filmmakers, writers, and everyday schmoes. It's The Life with Don Smith, Wednesdays at noon on 106.9 FM, and now available on the Eventide Entertainment podcast feed every Friday on Spreaker, YouTube, and iTunes.
All right, and we are back for the second half of this episode of The Drive-In on Annihilation. Andre and I have just been talking about the Night of the Bear with the shoddy use of the Watchtower. We are now, though, the next day. The next day is... it comes on very quickly. It's kind of like an assumption that Cass Shepard has died, and they are still going to continue on toward the town, which was the plan from the night before. But they see, I think it was her foot in the woods. Was I wrong, or?
Yeah, I think it was both of them. Actually, it was her boots with the foot in it.
Okay, so she's been dismembered in some fashion, and they say, we need to find out if she's alive or dead. And they're like, she's probably dead, which... Ventress is right. She is probably dead. But Lena says that she needs to know, and we need to make sure because it's only right. So Lena goes out, and she goes to figure out if she is alive.
So let me stop you, because we skipped over the conversation in the tower, which is when I noticed something today. And I don't think we've talked about the mark on Natalie Portman's arm.
Yes. Okay, yes.
Okay, so it starts out as a bruise, right? That's what she thinks it is. And I didn't notice it until today, but as they're having that conversation in the tower and Gina Rodriguez is yelling about it, she's talking with her hands, and she has that tattoo on her left arm.
Yep, her and those are the only two characters that I saw that on. But they both have, it's like a figure 8 snake tattoo.
Yeah, so I didn't notice that until today, but it was just something I was like, that's where it came from.
Yeah, and I don't really know why, perhaps, but... Yeah, so I don't know. Why do they both have the same tattoo then?
Well, so I was mad at myself for not checking, because if I had noticed that, I would have looked at it the second time around. But I want to see when they're at the table, when they first meet, if she has it. Because if she has the tattoo, then we get into like the whole refracting thing, and that would make sense as to why Natalie Portman has it. But I don't know if it was something that she had or that she got when they went in.
It makes me start to wonder if Portman starts to take on characteristics of all of the characters, and that's the one that she takes on from Rodriguez's character.
Yeah.
And we just didn't notice the other ones. I don't know.
That may be it.
Damn it, now I gotta go back and watch it again. Try to figure it out. So, yeah, we that's a good point, because I had noticed that, and I don't know if I would have brought that in anywhere. But yeah, I noticed that it was that way too. It was kind of weird. I was like, wait, they have the same tattoo, but they never talk about it. There's never any mention of it.
Well, so that's when they first start the movie, she looks down at her arm when he mentions her. And then, like, it didn't click the first time around until I saw it the second time, and I was like, that makes more sense now.
Yeah. All right, well, now I'm mad that I don't have an answer to that. Yeah. I'll have to, if anybody listening caught on to that, let us know, because we clearly have no idea what happened. So if you saw it and you have a better explanation other than it just is, then let us know. Okay, so she goes out to look for the body, or hopefully the alive body, but regardless, the body of Shepard, and she sees what I like to call the tree deers. These two, and this was when they mentioned at one point the duplication. They said there was a lot of weird things that happened in there, and this is when she's talking to the guy at the beginning of the movie who she's kind of telling the story. She mentions that there were some duplications, and they were almost like the idea of an echo, of two things happening almost at the same time, but not completely. And these two deer their antlers are basically tree branches with blossoms on them. Really visually just a cool creature that was created. But they mirror each other almost perfectly, not completely. And one of them is white with a couple spots, and the other one is very gray, and it looks like almost like a rotten apple. It looks like it's the same creature as the other one, but like it is decaying a little bit. I don't know did you catch anything with that? Because it was just a moment, but it was kind of cool.
I think I was too amazed by how it looked visually. For me, I'm a Miyazaki fan, which he did a lot of like really good, I wouldn't call them anime films, but animated films.
Yeah.
And for me, it was like if somebody had taken what he did at the time and then turned it into what it is now, like that's what it would have looked like.
Okay. Yeah, and it was, while we're talking about it, just visually, what an awesome movie as far as the visualization went. I have my issues with some of the plot points. I have issues with some of the characterization. Was it a bad movie? No, but visually, just stunning.
Yeah, even just like, because you can't ever really tell what time of day it is, but you can always see the sun in the distance, and it's coming through what is essentially the prism, and it's just, it looked gorgeous.
And it's cool because I remember when they talked about J.J. Abrams and his use of light with the first Star Trek movie, of how he did not worry about what it would look like cinematically, but he embraced the concept of what the light would do naturally. So if you looked at a light in a camera, it would kind of have this weird glare. And he embraced that, and that was really cool because that was one of the things that no one had done before. They embraced what the prism would have done, but the impact of what they have had to have done to do that, because they had to create this. This was not natural. This is what it would have looked like naturally, but there's no way of that actually naturally happening. So the way they do it throughout the entire movie is just the amount of time that it must have taken whoever was doing the visual effects. Bravo, because damn, it was pretty cool, pretty impressive.
Yeah, it was, like you said, despite what, any complaints anybody has about it, it was a great looking movie. Like everything visually about it was just amazing.
Yeah, and I think my favorite point visually was probably down in the hole, which we're going to jump ahead a little bit just to talk about this. We won't talk about the plot, but the kind of the inwardly rotating blob that eventually came to be something.
Yes.
Which,
by the way, the music as well matched with the visuals that happened was just, it was like it puts you in the zone for a movie.
The music in this was... What were the vibes of the music to you in this movie? Because I've got my thoughts of this. The music, the soundtrack of this movie, the score of it, made me feel like it was a certain type of movie. I want to see what you thought about it first.
So, well, back to just like creeping me out is that the whole ending sequence, like the music that's playing, is perfectly matched to what's going on, and it just creeps you the hell out.
I got the feeling it almost felt like an old Western to me. Like the style of music was almost like... It was like a Johnny Cash kind of, but without Johnny Cash's voice. It was like, it was eerie, but dark, but yet somewhat, not enlightening, but just, it was hopeful without hope. And that's such an abstract thought, but it's like,
I can see how you got there.
Yeah, it was all of this, but absolutely none of this. Yeah, it makes perfect sense.
Yeah, so and again, it's one of those things that just goes hand in hand with the movie. Like anyone can pull anything out of that situation from the way they set it up. But yeah, for me, it definitely creeped me out.
Yeah, and I'm happy to see a movie, at least visually, it hit the mark. It did what it needed to do as far as that goes. But talking about visual creepiness, we get into the town. She goes and she finds, before they get into the town, so let's go back just a little bit. She does find the dead body of Shepard, and she touches her arm, and then we cut to her walking back, and they're like, "Did you find her? Yeah, she's dead. Let's go." Which is important that she was the only one who saw it for a point that happens later on. But they continue on and they get to the town, and the first thing you see in this town as they walk up is Anya goes and sits down at this like old rusted picnic set, and she looks over and they walk and they see these plants that I thought was probably the creepiest element of the whole movie as far as visually.
Yeah, super creepy.
These plants have grown in a way that are seen as people. They've grown as a human body would look. I thought it was kind of the same concept of like, an atom bomb going off and somebody's shadow being hit against a wall. But it wasn't. I kind of was thinking like, oh, these people were actually here with the shimmer transformed them into this. Which might have actually happened, but I don't know because that's another unanswered question. But they were people, and one of them was even more disturbing because it was what looked like to be a mother or father holding the hand of a child.
Yeah,
and it was
so. I mean, they had
weird.
said that everything had been evacuated, but then you kind of have that thought, like, did you get everybody, or because it was just super super creepy.
And these people, Josie has this. This is where we get probably the most important revelation as far as a theory within the movie goes, where Josie says if you were to look at the DNA strands of this, you would see some sort of DNA that was basically in every human, which shows the makeup of our frame, of our body frame. It shows, hey, legs attached to hips, attached to a torso with arms and neck, and like that builds who we are. And she's like, you would see that. And Portman's character says, well, it's impossible. And she goes, it is, but it would be there. And then she talks about the concept of everything is refracted. Everything. And it's important because that includes them. And that's where we start to see some of the weird twists and turns as far as the people themselves are becoming impacted. They are mutating. Their bodies and DNA are being refracted while they are in the shimmer, which was a cool concept that I never really thought about until that point. What about you?
Yeah, I mean, the big thing for me was, like, the question in my head was, how did people get affected first? Because, obviously, Gina Rodriguez became the most unstable first, and then it kind of went from there. But that was the big question I had was, like, essentially, how is it choosing, like, who to affect?
And there is that idea, and I don't remember. It's the morning after, so we'll wait for that. But, yeah, Gina Rodriguez's character starts to, when they get into the town, they go into a house and they're looking around, and to me the house, this must have just been coincidence, but when they walk into the house, the stairway that you see going up, it looked identical to Lena's house. You get that? I
had that same thought, and there was a picture in the same place on the wall. So she had 4 at home, but there was only 1, and it was still too close. Like, the kitchen area looked the same. It was too close to be a coincidence.
Yeah. So I'm glad I wasn't the only one and they never talk about it, which I'm in a way I'm kind of glad to just have it be like a continuation of what was going on. But at the same time, if it was supposed to be a mirror of their house in some way, why? I kind of would have liked to have seen a little bit more with that. But they go in, and you immediately see Rodriguez's character look down at her hand, and the subtlety of which you see it is pretty cool. But you see her hand, the handprint in her, the indentions in her hand and her palm are moving, and it's very subtle, but it's clearly there. She makes a fist and closes her hand, but Lena saw her doing that, and then we immediately jump to this discussion of the affair. So it kind of, here's one of those choppy moments. This is not yet the one that I'm upset about. We're getting closer and closer. I know you're on the edge of your seat. Like, what didn't he like? What didn't he like? No, it's a jump to the affair, though, which we have seen this opening before, where you see Natalie Portman, who is, it's a very tastefully done sex scene, if you will. Or Natalie Portman in this David character that we mentioned from the beginning. But this time it goes beyond this sequence that they are, in the throes of passion. it goes to the aftermath of her saying it was a mistake and him kind of prodding her of saying, and for me, I thought that the first time I saw it, I was like, oh, she had this affair, but it wasn't an affair because her husband was dead. Like, and the first time I thought, I'm like, oh, her husband's dead, she needs to be with somebody. But then I started piecing it together in my head. I'm like, well, he has a wife, and they talk about her husband is gone. They don't know what's wrong, but does he know? So this seems like this affair happened long before he was gone, the most recent time in the Shimmer. Did you get that?
from the conversation as well, because he tells her, he's like, you see him less than you, or what, I forget what he says, but basically he's gone more than you see him.
Yeah, all these like secret missions.
Just, yeah. So it seemed like this was just regularly, like a regular thing he and her were doing.
So she says that it's over. She's cutting it off, and this is one of those moments of harsh reality and almost an uncomfortable truth. But he says, "You don't hate me, you hate yourself." And a lot of that you can see. If you think about the psychology behind an affair, a lot of it does stem with the person being unhappy, but a lot of it stems with the unhappiness with themselves and trying to find happiness. But her response is what's even better. She's
yes.
It's basically, "No, you're right, but I hate you too."
Yeah, she's like, "No, I hate you too, dude."
Like, you're not out of this. And it's kind of one of those moments where I don't know if we needed the affair in the movie. I don't know what it really added. I mean, it added an element to the movie that we wouldn't have gotten. But do you think that we needed this story to explain anything?
I don't think it says anything about her character. I mean, I think if you drop those 3 or 4 scenes, whatever they are, even him at the beginning of the movie, I don't think you lose out on anything.
The only thing I can maybe see that we would potentially lose out on is that could be the reason why Kane decided to go, is he thought he lost his marriage and he didn't have anything to live for, so let's go ahead and try to see what we can see what's in this Shimmer.
You know what makes sense now is later on in the movie when she's like, "I owed him." I think that may be what she was talking about.
She felt guilt. Yeah, I can see that. So we jump back into a rude awakening because there's a gun pointed at Lena's face, held by Anya, Rodriguez's character, calling her a liar and saying, you have no right to talk, you don't get to ask questions, and knocks her out with the butt of her gun. She wakes up again, tied up alongside of Josie and Ventress, and they're all tied up and essentially gagged, and you have Anya standing there talking to them. It was a really uncomfortable scene. But you see the mental breakdown of Anya in this scene, and the subtlety of how it happened I thought was pretty cool, and almost not so subtle, the very quick jumps. Anya's been this character who, I don't know if you noticed, but she mentions the theories 2 or 3 times. She talks about there's 2 reasons why people didn't come out. Something killed them, or they went crazy and killed each other. And she's almost in this scene, she believes both of them, but there's like a switch that happens mid-sentence. As she's saying that, she's like, we've seen things kill. Like the bear killed Cass, and the gator. The gator tried to kill Josie. We've seen these things try to kill. But then again, did we? So it's almost like somebody's in her head kind of poking at her.
I think she played that conflict beautifully, like just between the, what's really going on, and you can tell her character is just coming unwound, like she's losing it at that point. And she portrayed that masterfully.
Yeah, I loved that, because it was like split personality, which is kind of what is happening to a lot of these characters. They're losing their mind, but they're almost not losing their mind. And I think in itself is kind of crazy. It's kind of mind-altering. And she's about ready to shoot, or not shoot, was she ready to stab her? She's going to hurt Lena when you hear a scream come from out. And this is probably I think I might have said this before, so if I did, I am withdrawing this previous statement and saying now, this is probably my most unsettling moment of the entire movie.
This was where creepy hit a new high. Like, I was just, once you figure out what happened, like the bear comes in, you're just like, no, this shouldn't be, I don't feel right.
You hear a scream, and the scream sounds like Shepard's. Anya runs out, saying, you said she was dead, and she runs out, and immediately you hear a roar and then silence. And so you're like, okay, that wasn't Shepard. We saw Shepard's dead body, so we know it wasn't Shepard. Then the shadow of the bear creeps in, and the bear is walking in. It doesn't immediately do the voice thing, but after a little bit, you see it start to like growl, and every time it growls and opens its mouth, it's mimicking the screams of Shepard as she was dying. Totally screwed up. Just completely messed with me. It reminded me a lot of... They didn't do a very good job of it in the movies, but if you ever read any of the Hunger Games books, there was the concept that I think it was actually the Mockingjays were sent into one of the arenas.
Yeah.
And they were supposed to sound like the loved ones screaming.
Yeah, they did that in the second one, I think.
Yeah, I don't remember it. And if they did it, I don't think they did it well. I didn't like those movies.
I remember it was her sister. Like, her sister was screaming, and that's... Yeah. But that was just such a weird part to... And I'm sure from an actor's perspective, like, it was probably super fun for Shepard to just scream into a microphone forever until they got the right ones.
Yeah. Oh, man. And then it's even more screwed up when the next morning... We'll finish the conversation about that night, but the next morning when Josie says kind of the explanation as to how her DNA must have imprinted on this bear's as she was dying.
Yeah.
And so the only thing that survived of Shepard was her last dying moments of fear and pain. And you're like, oh, that's screwed up. That is a messed up idea. Cool, but screwed up. Like, it's like intriguing, like, oh, that's awesome. That's still really screwed up.
It's like, from a science aspect, it's cool, but then you're like, I don't want that to happen to me or anybody I know.
Yeah. And it's just, and I think that also is compounded with what Josie goes on to do. But before we get to that, let's finish up conversation about what happens at night. So, essentially, you see Josie not being able to hold her cool because you have a snarling half-dead... And I thought the way they portrayed the bear was really cool. It looked like he was... Like, his face was not completely there. Or, like, his snout had been altered. The mutation was very clear.
It was, like, sort of anteater snout. Like, it was really long.
It looked to me like what you would see those stereotypical, like, Texas horns of the skull of the bull. It looked like that was, like, imposed on the front of the bear.
No, I have no idea what you're talking about, Aaron. I've never seen
no
this.
idea. Never seen one of those before. So I had to include a little bit of a Texas flair from Ohio.
I'm okay with that. As
right,
much Texas as you want to include, I'll be happy with.
All right. Well, don't give me that freedom. So, yeah, anyway, she's got this bear snarling in front of her. It's, like, bloody, and it's screaming in front of her. And she's losing her cool, as anybody would. I don't understand why, though, that the reaction is why it could attack. Because, like, this bear's... You've got 3 people who are tied up and gagged. Basically a free meal for this animal. And it isn't attacking them. The only time it attacks was when Josie starts to cry and loses it. And the weird part about it is even Lena says, don't react. So it's a reaction. I didn't understand why that was the case.
So the only thing I can think of is it didn't look like it had fed on Shepard, like it killed Shepard to kill her. And I don't know if maybe that's what it was. Like, it wasn't for food purposes. It was more of like, you know, they tell you, like, you see a gorilla in the jungle, you either don't or do back down. I don't know which one, so I would die. But I think it's that same thing. Like, the bear is trying to establish, like, who are you? Like, what are you right now?
Yeah, like a dominance thing. Which, I mean, that plays into the concept of the shimmer by the end. So, yeah, we see Josie freak out, and in walks in Anya, or limps in, or drags herself in, the rest of her, with a gun. And again, Anya is not trained, and she can't hit anything. I'm surprised she didn't take out all of the girls who are sitting there at the same time. But she causes enough of a distraction to then get the bear to run after her and just rip her to shreds. It is, again, this whole sequence is, I remember seeing people in the audience like going like, damn, like, what the hell are we seeing here? Like, she gets dragged down the stairs and then bit in the neck and then taken out, like, pretty brutal way to die. And the part that you see is you see the blood like splattering up on the bear's face of what he's doing. You don't see her necessarily as much, but you see the consequence of it, the result.
Well, that's definitely how we got that R rating.
Oh yeah, I think that this whole sequence with the bear got us the R rating, because it's gruesome. It's not, they don't hold back in any way. And I don't think they should have, if that's the route they wanted to go. I don't know if they needed to, but they did, and I think it was done effectively. So then, though, you have the bear going after Lena's character, who is trying to escape, because as it went toward Anya, it knocked them over, and they were able to partially free themselves from these chairs. Josie completely, because Josie gets up and she does a number on this bear's head with that gun.
Yeah, that was the most satisfying moment of the movie.
Wow. You basically see from one side, you've got a front view of the bear's head, and you see, like, from the left-hand side or the right-hand side, just brains flying out of it. And it's a trooper, because it stands up for another, like, 5 seconds before it dies. But just, that was gruesome. So gruesome.
It was a good payoff, though, for Shepard and Anya. It was.
Because, I mean, Shepard... I agree. I think Shepard didn't get her due. I liked her as a character. And her death was kind of minimal. Like, you see the bite, but it's dark, so you really don't see it very clear. And Anya's, again, all these things happen at night, so they're dark. This thing happens right next to the fire, so you really get to see a final conclusion to at least something. So we got bye-bye Anya, and almost bye-bye Lena, but she can't die yet. She's the main character. We still have a few more minutes of time to eat up. Ventress leaves, though, which I kind of saw as a weird... I understood her reasoning, but I saw it was weird that they didn't go with her. She says, basically, the person that I came in is not going to be the same person that leaves if we continue waiting. Our bodies are changing. We've got less and less time. So Ventress leaves, and the next morning, Josie becomes a plant.
That's about as accurate a description as you can get.
Sounds so stupid to say, but it was cool, and I was so mad that we didn't see more of it. If you blinked in the theater, you missed the cool moment of it happening. It was so quick. But she essentially is playing with these, like, plants. Where Josie's sitting outside in the morning after, and there's this conversation about what we talked about, how Shepard's mind kind of gets imprinted, and they're talking about this. And Josie, for the first time in the movie, she doesn't have on sleeves. You see very how much self-harm she caused herself. There are marks up, and there's marks up and down her arms, on both arms. Very kind of if you have any personal connection to that, either yourself or through somebody that you know. It had to have been a very powerful moment just to see that. That's usually things that are not at the forefront of any film. But then you see it, and you see her putting, and I don't know if she put it or if it just started growing, but you see her arms and you see plants on them. And I kind of felt like she was messing around and she put it on there. But then you see, like, her walking away, and she's got, like, a ton of flowers and stems and branches starting to grow out of her.
Yeah, it was just like more and more kept showing up every step she took.
But then she turns a corner and she's gone. And I'm like, oh, I wanted to see more of it. Like, let me see this person turn into a plant.
Well, and I was expecting her to be one of those, like, plant people that were there, but that wasn't it. Like,
well, and we don't know. It might have been, but they don't give us an answer. Like, because she's gone. She's just completely gone. And if I was expecting, like, them to walk up, like you said, like, we walk up and we see her, like, her shirt on one of the plant people or something. But I almost felt that she had turned into one of the plant people, but we just didn't see which one.
And it was that self-realization, because she tells Lena that, what Ventress wants to find this, you want to fight it, and she's like, I don't want either of those things.
Yeah, she doesn't even say it, but it seems like she wants to just be one of them. She just wants to let it win. It is probably more peaceful to let it win than it would be if she fought. Because she saw what happened to both Anya and Shepard when they fought. So she kind of just said, nope, I'm not going that route. And this is my upset moment. All of a sudden, Lena's at the lighthouse. I was upset for two reasons. One, the shimmer was nowhere to be seen in the entire shot. At every point in time that we even said before this, you always would see the shimmer in the background, like up in the sky. You would see it. You would see something. And there was no shimmer anywhere. And I was kind of confused as to how that would be. But also, too, how did she get down there? Like, you're telling me that this person who was, you know, I mean, I know it was only a few hours away, but she walked a few hours by herself and nothing happened?
So that's what I was going to say, was they did mention, like, it's only a 2-hour hike to the coast.
But still, I don't know. It was so anticlimactic. Like, they've been trying to get here this whole time, and then all of a sudden, we got Josie's a tree, and now I'm at the lighthouse. And it's like, what? Oh, come on. I don't know. It makes sense because the rest of the movie, they have not dragged anything along, but that was one where I felt like I could have seen her do something.
Maybe. Well, and I don't know if this was when she had that conversation with the guy she's telling the story to, but he was basically like, one by one, they're all gone except for you.
Yeah, and she said, you know, like, you explain it. And she's like, do I have to? Like, it just happened. And he's like, yeah, you have to explain it because you're the only person that survived. And I get that.
But then she tells him, you know, like, I had a reason to come back. None of them did.
Exactly, and that's when we find out that Ventress had terminal cancer.
Yeah.
You know, and that makes sense because that's the concept of her desperately needing to find an answer to this because she doesn't have more time. She feels guilty for all the people that she sent in to try to figure this out and who have died, and this is her last chance. Also playing into that continual motif of the tumor. With her having cancer, clearly this comes from a tumor, and I loved the subtlety of that. They didn't really like put it in front of your face and say like, yeah, see, tumor, she's got cancer. It just kind of was one of the things that they'd mentioned enough times that you could start to put it together yourself.
Yeah.
So she gets to the lighthouse, and there's a lot of cool things that are around this lighthouse. You see these like crystal trees that have been growing out of the sand. You see the almost like, I don't know how to explain it, but like a bones burial ground, but they weren't buried. They were.
So one of the things I did notice was as she's walking in between the crystal trees, there's actually a body that's buried in the sand there that looks like it's being soaked in. Yeah.
It seemed like a lot of people had gotten to the lighthouse, but none of them ever came back. Well, clearly none of them came back, but a lot of people made it there.
Yeah, there were at least like 10 skulls, I think, in the front.
I was trying to count them, and I don't remember. I think 10. It was somewhere. It was definitely more than 5. It seemed like 8, 10, 12. It was a lot of people. But the weird part is that they were organized. So something organized their bones. Because it wasn't just like someone died and then their body had like kind of started to rot away and decompose. All of the rib cages were like turned upside down and like shoved into the ground.
Yeah, they were almost put there with purpose, like as the intention of look at all of these dead people.
Yeah, and the skulls were lined up, and all of the the femurs were. It was a really really weird scene. But we go into the lighthouse, and
by the way, like I'm expecting, right? She goes into the lighthouse, huge reveal, and she walks in, and it's just a lighthouse.
Yeah. The only thing you see is like this like kind of marble bone-like growth that is happening from it, but it's nothing like really major. You just see this lighthouse. You see like this hole of death, this black dark hole, which is really creepy. But then you don't see anything. She actually looks over to the side and sees a charred body that looks like it had been exploded, but something happened with it. And then after that, she looks to her other side and sees a camera, which I think that you would have seen the camera first if it's sitting in the middle of this room and you're walking in. The reveal showed it much later. But this is one of those weird moments where we see she watches the camera and Kane kills himself. Kane grabs I think it's a white phosphorus grenade, and holds onto it and tells somebody else. He says, hey, this is going to be really bright, so you probably should shield your eyes. And then right before he pulls the pin on it, he says, if you ever get out of here, go find Lena. And the person says, I will. And then after the flash goes on, you see someone who looks exactly like Kane walk in front of the camera and then turn and look at the camera, and then it goes away. So there's our huge reveal that that's not Kane, that's something else that looks like Kane. What were your thoughts on that? Because as soon as you get that major reveal, you start to play through all these potential scenarios of what may be going on.
So I think the best part is when he speaks from the camera, like, okay, I will, or whatever he says, because you get that chill and you're like, is that who I think it is? And then he comes around, you get the reveal, and you're like, that's the payoff. Like, this isn't her
Sounded
husband.
like him. Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. And it was just this idea of the duplications. They had talked about the duplications before, but really that's when you finally see this concept of duplication coming. And then she starts hearing these noises. So she's freaked out because she's seeing...
I'm freaked out at that point.
Well, she sees the body of her dead husband, who at the same time isn't her dead husband because she's seen her dead husband, or she's seen him alive, but now maybe he's dead again. And then you hear screams coming from the hole. And of course she goes down the hole. It's like, no, don't go down the rabbit hole. But she does. And Ventress is acting weird. And I don't know if you got the same impression that I did. Doesn't it seem like Ventress's eyes are like melted shut, and then she turns and they're not?
The creepy face was so just that sent a chill up my spine.
And I'm glad that you saw it too, because I honestly wasn't sure. When she turned and looked at her and she had her normal face, I was like, oh, okay, maybe I just saw it wrong. Okay, now I am even more disturbed. But she goes into this acting weird. She's like saying all this like philosophical stuff about, what this thing is, and then she drops the name of the movie. She's like, and it leading toward annihilation. And I'm like, doing the Peter Griffin thing. She's like, she said it, I'm done, I can walk out.
I had that same thought, and I was like, I hate that I do that now.
But yeah, anytime people say the name of the movie, you're like, yeah. Like sometimes it's obvious, like Black Panther. Well, duh. But then Annihilation, like, oh. Usually they do it a lot sooner. And then I don't know what the hell this stuff was. But then she like is basically saying like she's dead. She is okay with being taken over by it, and then like her body just starts throwing up this like lava light stuff.
Yeah, it was interesting because we got that little like cell split again on one of the pieces, which is a recurring theme they were using, and then she turns into like that glowing orb of whatever it is.
Yeah, it was really interesting. Like visually, that it was like turning on itself inside out. We did recently just see that at the very beginning, before she went down to the lighthouse or down the hole. Like we saw what may have happened to Kane, dealing with that. We saw like something looking at the hole. We saw this light that was turning in on itself, and so we see it again. And then like a droplet of her blood is like sucked into it, and then immediately it starts like turning in like with a cell split. It starts splitting and growing, and then we see this thing standing there very quickly. Well, the cool part for me was when she started shooting it, and like you saw like what the bullet the traveling of the bullets after it would have gone through it stuck to the person. It's like these tentacles or something. So she freaks out. She runs up the hole, as we all would have, and then she turns around and the thing is standing there, and then the tentacles from the bullets disappear, and then we get this like weird standoff, and I was uncomfortable with it because there was no words said for like the next 5 minutes of the movie.
I didn't even think about that, but yeah, it is just anytime that's going on, and I'm sure they CGI'd it to match her or whatever, but it was just so well done that it just creeps you out.
Well, and what creeped me out the most was that it wasn't a perfect mirror. It was like a half-second delay, and sometimes it didn't even go to the same extent that she was doing.
Yeah, like she would take a step back and it would step forward.
Yeah. And so then we go through this long, drawn-out sequence, and it was really bizarre because, like I said, there's no speaking. You hear noises. It's not like it's dead silence, but you don't hear her talking. It's just reaction. And so she runs to the door, and it like presses itself against her, and almost looks like it kills her. I thought she died at that point. But then they both fall at the same time. And that's the second time. The first time, she like backhands her. She like bitch slaps Natalie Portman, this humanoid, and then she falls, and then it like crawls on the ground, so that way it seems like, oh, hey, she fell, I need to fall too. It was weird.
The whole ballet going on at this time is so just, it's like nothing I've seen in a movie before. I mean, the closest thing I could equate that humanoid to is like the movie Abyss when the head comes out of the water. But other than that, like, it was just the color scheme was weird. Like, it was so strange to just see this thing doing what it did to her.
Yeah, and by the end, I still have a ton of questions. It essentially, she walks over to the bag where the other grenades were, and Lena picks out a grenade and like opens or like puts it out, and the creature, the humanoid, takes it from her, and then she takes her other hand and like pulls the grenade, and then like waits a second and a half, and then runs, and then the humanoid doesn't know what to do. And then at this point, it's become Natalie Portman. Like, this has become her. She has all the features, and then it just like explodes, but it doesn't kill it. It just gets rid of the Natalie Portman features, and it's got like burning hands. Goes around touching everything and like burns the lighthouse down. I was like, collateral damage, totally.
And it seemed like it didn't know what it was doing. Like, it walked up and touched Kane, and then it was like leaning on the wall, and it was like kind of realizing like, I'm burning everything down.
And then finally crawls down into the hole, which at that point it becomes a little bit more obvious that the hole is kind of like a network of tunnels, or at least like the roots that's reaching out, because it's burning down there. Everything around it, like all the crystal trees, start to shatter and melt, and it's like a domino effect of whatever happens down in this hole, which is where this humanoid was created, which presumably is where the asteroid and the alien creature, whatever it was, kind of lived.
And we didn't really talk about the hole too much, but that really reminded me of like Aliens and how they would take over an area and make it look like that black sidewall stuff.
It almost felt like, do you watch Stranger Things?
Yeah.
It kind of felt a little bit like the Upside Down almost.
I can see that.
So it was weird, but you've got almost like a black oozing mass that is also glassy.
It looked like it was moving.
I think it was, yeah. Or at least had the appearance of it. So she grabs it. The lighthouse burns. Everything burns, and that kind of is it. The shimmer is then discussed, and she says, like it was doing bad things. It was destroying everything, and she's like, no, it wasn't destroying. It was changing. It was making something new, which is unfortunately that line was in the trailer, so it's not like it was. But she says that, and then we find out the shimmer disappeared shortly after, and the lighthouse burned down, and nothing was in there but ashes. So it's like, whatever was there is gone. It's dead. And so she asks, Lena says, well, is my husband still alive? And yeah, and he actually, after the shimmer went away, he woke up, and he was fine. He was healthy. He actually he's lucid, and like he's communicating. But he's still in isolation. She's like, well, so am I. And so they're like, okay, so I guess that means that you guys can see each other. I didn't understand why they were able to.
Yeah, just from a process perspective, like, that doesn't make any sense at all.
Like, he's in isolation. Yes, I am too. You guys can now see each other. Like, oh, all right.
That's not how the word isolation works.
I know. But they open it up, and then she asks, she's like, you're not really Kane, are you? And he says, I don't think so, which is cool because it's that same concept that they have been saying the whole time. They ask a question, and he says, I don't know. They've always been saying, I don't know. But then he says, I don't think so, means like he thinks he may not be. Like, he actually has a reason for it. And then he says, are you Lena? And then this is where it gets interesting. She doesn't respond. It's just kind of one of those like, oh, yeah, I guess you must be because you're crying and you're upset. And they hug. And then you see his eyes, and they kind of like glow and get bigger, like shine. There's the shimmer there. And then they see her eyes, and the same thing happens. And then end of movie. So, what the hell's the explanation? How do you see the ending of this movie? What does it mean for you?
So for me, I mean, at least my interpretation is like, this is what it wanted all along. And it basically waited 3 years to get it, but the alien got what it wanted. And now it has these two people who can go out and do basically whatever they want to because no one's stopping them.
Yeah, I got that too. My whole thought process, my theory of this is that once it needed someone to survive. It needed someone to create the humanoid. The humanoid would be the person that could last the longest, who had the DNA that they needed. He went in, he survived it. Then he said, find Lena, and he did find Lena. then he went back. He said he went back in. The whole process was just to get her there.
Yeah.
She went in. They knew that she would protect it. They knew all of this. So she went in basically to become the Eve to his Adam. And now that they're both... I think that actually Lena is dead. I think that the memory that we saw of what happened was what the humanoid told it what happened. I think it actually killed her. She walked away, and then they burned it down so they can say, okay, now we're out. But then now you have a male and a female who can then continue the process of taking over this planet.
Yeah, and that's kind of... That was my thought process in the background as well, was basically she's telling the story. So if it's not her, you can make up anything you want to about what happened in the lighthouse, and they're going to believe you because they don't have anything to say otherwise.
And that's one of those things. It's funny because, I'm an English teacher, and I always tell my students, I'm like, guys, never trust your narrator. Always question, because your narrator is biased. They're going to tell you what they want you to know. And even in the most clearly, unbiased situation, you can't trust your narrator. And I tell them that. And this is one of those situations where you're like, you don't realize that you shouldn't trust her until the end, where you're like, oh, maybe everything we've just seen is not actually what happened.
Yep.
And it's just like, either you love the idea, or you're like, I just wasted 2 hours of my life.
I'm in the former, so I'm good.
Yeah, I liked it. Okay, so we're at the end here. I got a couple kind of fun questions. What was your favorite creature in the whole thing?
I think you called them tree deers. I was going to go with antelope flowers, but same concept.
Yeah, those were cool. Overall, I wish we would have had more creatures.
Yeah.
I'm glad they didn't overkill it, but we only saw the fish things for a little bit, because she was saying some things were beautiful, and then we had to see something beautiful.
So I did have a theory on why there were less creatures. And
okay,
when she's walking into the base and she sees that mess on the wall, once we learn that happened to one of the humans, it makes sense that the creatures could have just turned into basically decorations on the walls.
It's true. And you look at the concept of mutation, and not every single thing can handle mutation. It's the concept that the strongest will survive, and they will get those mutations, and that will help them to continue. So that very well could be the case. I just wish we would have saw a little bit more. You've basically, outside of the tree, deer, antler things, you've got the gator shark, and you've got the bear, and that was really it.
Gator shark.
Someone's gonna hear this and pitch to Syfy, and then we're gonna see this movie come out in a year, or I don't know. Their budget and their timelines are usually 2 weeks. So next week we're gonna see Gator Shark.
They're already running promos for it. Yeah, it's
in post production already. Okay, character that you wanted to see more of that you didn't get enough of.
So I was hoping you'd ask that one, and I have the opposite. There was a character I saw too much of. First of all, I think all of the women did a great job. I don't think more or less of anybody would have been good, other than we kind of talked about Shepard. But you mentioned the guy she's telling the story to. So,
Benedict Wong.
Yeah, Benedict Wong.
Yeah.
So he's Wong in Doctor Strange, but he's also Kublai Khan in the Marco Polo Netflix series. And I'm a huge fan of this guy playing roles, and there was no purpose for him to be there. Anybody could have played that guy.
Yeah. I agree. I saw him and I was like, oh my god, Doctor Strange. I agree. He didn't really serve a purpose. He was, there's some diversity there, which is great.
Yeah.
But, yeah.
He had a good voice to ask questions, but I couldn't think of a purpose for him to be there.
Yeah, he was kind of a vehicle for the reason why we were hearing the story.
Yeah.
But himself, yeah. I think I wanted to see a little bit more of Josie. I liked her story, and I liked the whole concept of there were some pretty dark issues that laid underneath that character with the mental health and the self-harm, and I was really happy to see how they portrayed that, and how it was almost this idea of the person who was in the most mental pain throughout her life died in the most calm and peaceful way.
Yeah.
So I think in a way there was kind of it's okay. It was almost a small commentary on mental illness. I almost wanted to see just more of her struggle to give more weight to that conversation. But again, I think that they all did such a great job. We didn't really talk about this, but what do you think the impact of this concept of, because we're seeing it more and more in movies, but more of the concept of the females taking over the traditional male roles of being these like action sci-fi heroes almost.
So, I mean, obviously, I'm all for it. I think this was a great example of how well that can be done, because it was basically like, we've sent in a bunch of Marines and they've done nothing, so now we're going to send in smart, strong women and see what they can do. And I think that's great to see play up. A great example of it is, last week was Black Panther. Just every woman in that movie was a complete badass. And that's one of the things that I think we need more of as role models. It's the personal example I would use is the first time I showed The Force Awakens to my niece, she was like, but the main character is a girl. And I was like, yeah, she is. And she's like super into Star Wars now.
That's cool. Yeah. And I think it's important because unfortunately next week, you know what comes out? That we're going to finally get to see Red Sparrow. So we can add that to the list of powerful females. I'm so done with that movie. But yes, I think it's really cool. We've seen, in the past year, the amount of strong female characters, and I mean, the ending isn't the most positive for any gender, because apparently all of humanity is doomed after the credits roll. But to see how they put the narrative into 5 women, as opposed to saying like, even having one guy, it's still that same Chris Pine conversation that people have with Wonder Woman, where they say, well, yeah, but he was still there. And there's some validity to that, but I still will argue that I think they did a very good job of making Gal Gadot's Wonder Woman the focal point and the driving force of all of that. But by having almost all men completely absent from this, it made it like, hey, whether or not they're going to get out alive or they're going to succeed, it's their story. It's their narrative that we're going to see, and that can't be tainted.
Well, and even now that I'm thinking about it, when she's walking through the lab, like, I don't think there's a guy there. I think it's all women who are running the experiments.
And, well, because all the guys are dead, they've all gone into the ship.
Yeah, true. But I think that's similar to what Black Panther did. I mean, I think you talked about it last week, was Martin Freeman was, like, the only white character in there. There were no, like, white women who led. Like, it was all minorities and women that were in the movie. And I think they did a similar thing here, just it wasn't as noticeable, because you do get the mentions and, like, the video of Oscar Isaac cutting the guy open.
Yeah. Well, and then you look at it, too, you had 2 of the women. You had both Tessa Thompson and Gina Rodriguez. So you had some diversity even within that. And, and it's funny that you said that, too, because I think you actually even saw this, but there was the image that I found, the picture that said that you had Martin Freeman and Andy Serkis, who were the Tolkien, like,
yeah, because it's Gollum and Bilbo.
And Bilbo, yeah. That was funny. Even though, like, and then you see all the comments under it. People are like, there are more white guys. I'm like, yeah, but it's a joke. Just laugh at it and move on. But yeah, it's pretty cool. All right, so we're just about ready to wrap up. Your final thoughts overall for the movie, and then let's see. Do you have an idea of what we could have for a rating scale?
I was going to say creepy half-dead bears.
Okay, so 1 out of 5 creepy half-dead bears. And your final thoughts. Okay,
so I'd give it 4 creepy half-dead bears out of 5. I really liked it. I mean, I talked about this earlier, but I was not expecting to get creeped out, and even though it did creep me the hell out, I still really enjoyed it. I mean, coming home last night and then actually getting to enjoy the second presentation, because I didn't have obnoxious people next to me, was a lot better. It was very entertaining. It looked great visually. I can't really find anything wrong with the movie, honestly. So maybe I should move it to 5. But I don't know. Calling a movie perfect is just asking for trouble.
Yeah, I've only done it a couple times, and I think the times I've done it were movies that I was so biased going into that I don't think I would have given it anything less than a 5. Yeah, I'm really close to where you had it. I had 3.5. So actually, my 4th bear is decomposing.
He's got a hole in his head.
Yeah, a bigger one. It's the bear after Josie shot it in the head. That's my 4th bear. So it's only half there. 3 out of 5 bears for me. It looked awesome. The visual effects in this movie really pulled it along. I think the storyline is there, and actually now knowing that it's a book, Unfortunately, and I probably know the ending now, but I'd be very interested in reading the books. I was intrigued by the storyline. There are enough twists and turns about revealing, the aspect of the refracting DNA and all these different just cool sci-fi elements that you just haven't seen before. I don't think they ultimately hit the mark as well as they could have, but I do think that they did a lot of things that just made no sense, and in a positive way. They went off of the script of what a good sci-fi movie could be, and so I think it's going to be another decent sci-fi movie. Is it going to go down as one of the better ones? I don't think so. I don't think it has the lasting impact, because we started this off by saying, what the hell is this movie about? And we really don't know. So I think that's where it loses that extra 1.5 stars for me. But I liked it. I thought, though, that there were a lot of questions. Some of them answered, some of them not. So it's going to stick around in the conversation for a little while. But I think eventually this movie will kind of fade into the background. So yeah, before we sign off, though, because next week I will be joined by Chris Burnside, who is actually who was my first non-wife guest on episode 3 of with the Suburbicon. So it's been a long time. He was one of the first ones, and we just haven't had a reason to get him back on. But we're going to do an Oscar review next week, because this Sunday is the Oscars. So we will be checking out the Oscars on March 4th. Actually, it's just coming up in a few days here from when this airs. And I wanted to get your picks if you have any Oscar faves. I don't know if you had. You mentioned you had Movie Pass, so did you have an opportunity to see the Oscar award nominated movies?
Well, let me first start off by saying, obviously, I'm a huge fan of Chris, and everybody should listen to that podcast. But
yeah, I forgot you are an Unwritten fan as well.
I am a very big Unwritten fan. Yeah. So the other thing, I mean, the big one that kind of stood out to me, and it wasn't like an over-the-top great movie. It wasn't something that I think is going to get a lot more attention. But The Post. I was really happy with it.
Did you listen to the episode?
Yeah, I did.
Jordan hated the Post.
Yeah, I know. We disagree on some things. I really liked it. I think there were some things that probably could have been changed about it, but I haven't seen The Shape of Water yet. That one's probably going to be my favorite, if I'm being honest, but I need to make time to go see it.
Have you seen I, Tonya
yet? No, I need to make that one too.
Oh, you gotta see it.
I've heard really good things.
It's one of those movies that I wasn't sure if the movie itself would be good, and a lot of people had issues with it. You see a lot of people that were kind of disappointed in the setup, but Allison Janney in it just is phenomenal. I'm really pulling for her to win on Sunday, because she's, like I said before, she's the hometown girl, and she's been doing some really, really good stuff lately, so I kind of want her to win. But the other one that I wanted to see if you've seen is 3 Billboards. Did you get a chance to see that yet?
No, that one was limited release, and they didn't have it at this theater. I think there's one that's still showing it, so I'll probably try and go see it.
Yeah, if you get a chance to see that, if not, wait until it comes out on DVD. But just phenomenal story. For me, I think it's kind of one of those dark horses. It got a lot of attention early, but then faded away. In fact, I really haven't heard a whole lot about any of the Oscar movies recently. But I think that has a chance. I'm pulling, though, for Get Out to do some damage, because if it does, it is going to shake up how everybody looks at the Oscars.
It would. Obviously, that's probably a fan favorite. I think it's just everything that happened in that movie. And I don't remember what it was, but they classified it... Did they classify it as a horror movie, or what was it during the Golden Globes?
I'm pretty sure it was a horror movie. Yeah.
Okay. Yeah, that was interesting to me, because I feel like there was more horror in what I just saw than there was in that. But I don't know.
Well, psychological horror, because it's the truth behind what was going on in Get Out that I think is so disturbing, of how, yeah, this was an extreme case of it, but you see a lot of it actually happening on a smaller scale and more subtle ways in our society.
Yeah.
But I'm hoping Jordan Peele walks away with something, either for the directing or the writing. I think he's got a better chance at writing, because they're very picky with who they give the best director to. So, but hopefully, we will find out in a couple days. Andre, I'm really happy we were able to get this going, and hopefully as I go to edit this, it sounds as good to everybody who gets to hear it as it was to actually sit down and talk to you.
Yeah, I mean, I'll come back anytime. Just let me know. And like you said, hopefully the editing works out. Otherwise, I don't know if we can set aside the time to do this again.
I know. Well, you are a pioneer because you are the first long-distance guest host of the drive-in. So I hope it was a good experience. We'll try to get you on again here in a little bit.
Yeah, definitely. Let me know.
All right. Well, everybody, thank you for joining us. Like I said, next week you'll get to see or get to hear Chris and I talk about the Oscars, the things that we agreed with, the things that we disagreed with, and some of the fan favorites and the dark horses that either did or didn't get their dues. So until then, everybody drive home safe, and we'll see you soon.